So the Mariners are still striking out a lot. Well, are they striking out a lot? I can't tell. Is it 53 in this twin series? 53? Yeah, 53 strikeouts in 4 games. What are we supposed to do here? Like, what are we supposed to analyze? How are we supposed to digest the fact that despite the Mariners putting all their effort in this offseason to reduce strikeouts, and now that we've given it a month plus of time for them to get the rhythm, the weather has warmed up a little bit, and the hitters have gotten 100 plus at-bats to work out all the kinks. And yet we're still sitting here and the Mariners are outlier, the worst team in baseball at striking out. How is this possible?
I don't know, but this is not a good recipe if you're the Seattle Mariners. And I know that sounds like an obvious statement, but this is borderline worst case scenario if you're looking at this offense, because last year's team struck out a ton. We all know that. They survived and they hung around the playoff hunt all year because they could hit the long ball, and that was what saved them time after time after time. The Mariners this offseason got rid of 4 players because they really wanted to make a concerted effort to cut down on strikeouts. They did not retain Teoscar Hernandez. They did not retain Mike Ford. They traded Jared Kelenic, and they traded Eugenio Suarez. Those 4 guys all punched out 30% of the time or more last year. All of them. They didn't bring them back. They said, we've got to cut down on strikeouts. They brought in players that they expected were going to do that. Here we sit on May the 9th when we're recording this. That is so far not happening. And when you have that combination with the team still leading the league in strikeout rate, and they're not built to hit the long ball the same way they used to be, that is really not a good recipe. Something has to change.
When you have six players outlier worst year of their career in strikeout percentage, I'm just trying to sit here and think of where the whether it be approach or mindset, or is it the batter's eye at T-Mobile Park? Like all these theories, is the marine layer messing with everyone's head? Is everyone just selling out for power? Who's even the most puzzling one? I feel like it's got to be Jorge Polanco, because this dude's career strikeout percentage is under 19%, and he's striking out like Eugenio Suarez this year, 31% of the time. Like, how do we get to this point? How does one add this many strikeouts this quickly? It almost seems unlikely. So you mentioned a little bit at the beginning about, this team literally is a middle of the pack power team, and they're also a middle of the pack walk team. So when you say worst combination, the only worst combination that you could have than what the Mariners are currently running out is if they were worst in the league in power and worst at walking. So essentially all they did was walk up to the plate, strike out. They wouldn't walk, they wouldn't hit home runs, they wouldn't hit doubles, triples, etc., anything. And therefore they would be the worst offense, one of the worst offenses in the history of baseball if that's what they pulled out. Thankfully, actually by WRC plus, this is a league average offense. Believe it or not, 98 is where their WRC plus sat before today's game. So somehow they're surviving. But the current combination of outlier high strikeouts while walking at a middle of the pack rate and hitting for power at a middle of the pack rate as well is truly unsustainable. Like, they might barely squeak into the playoffs with this combination, but you and I have talked about this a lot. In the playoffs, to win games, you need to hit home runs, because the pitching in the playoffs gets way better. Guys go shorter, they throw harder, there's more specialization. Therefore, if you're trying to score runs, it's probably easiest to just hit the ball over the fence. The winning percentage in the playoffs the last, let's say 10 years, if you out-homer your opponent, it's like 95% you're going to win. 95%. And this team's currently not built to do that. It is truly a worst-case scenario for how you built this roster.
So as we sit right now, Ty France is striking out a little bit less than 25% of the time, which isn't awful in terms of a strikeout rate. The problem is, as we know, he has not gotten it going offensively. It's really been a struggle for Ty at the plate. JP was striking out about 18% of the time before he got injured, which is about what JP usually does, which is great because he strikes out less than 20% of the time. JP's never been a big strikeout guy. Josh Rojas is striking out a little less than 18% of the time. Also great. We can't say enough good things about Josh Rojas so far this year. But I got to go through the rest of this list. Let's read it down. And I'm going to try to do this without turning into the Joker here. But we're going to do it. Julio's striking out a little over 28% of the time. Demo's striking out a little over 28% of the time. And after that, man, like you have 4 hitters currently, 4 hitters that are everyday starters. I'm not including JP in this because he's been injured. You have 4 regular starters who are striking out less than 30% of the time, less than 30. So Julio, Demo, Ty France, Josh Rojas. Let's keep going. Mitch Haniger, 30.1% of the time he's striking out. Urias, 30.4%. Garver's over 30.5%. Polanco's over 31%. Dom Canzone, shorter sample, he's on the IL, about 31.5%. Luke Raley, just shy of 32%. Cal Raleigh's at 33.6%. And if you even want to throw in a couple others, while Jonathan Clase was up, he was just under 33%. And Sebi Zavala is over 42%. I just read through that entire Mariners lineup of guys that have played this year at somewhat of a consistent level. And you have 5 of those total guys, if you want to include Crawford, who are less than 30%. You have 2 who are less than 20% and 3 who are less than 25. Like that cannot sustain. No, sorry. That cannot continue. That's what I mean to say.
And it also might not be able to sustain itself. You know, I was trying to find an answer to this. Like I wanted to go into this segment. Why are they striking out so much? I could not find a definitive answer. I have some ideas, but I was hoping through my analysis of looking on Baseball Savant to try and find an answer of why they're striking out, besides the raw numbers themselves. When a 2-strike pitch is thrown, they're swinging and missing or watching it for strike 3. Yeah, duh. That's why they're striking out a lot. But it's more than that. Because if you think about this, you would expect a team that strikes out a lot to chase a lot. They're 5th in baseball in chase rate. They look, balls out of the zone, they're not swing. They're the 5th best team in baseball at not swinging at it. But I saw the point made earlier, and this makes a lot of sense. So overall, they're not chasing a lot. But when they do chase, they're chasing egregiously bad pitches, therefore less likely to hit it. Because while they're 5th in chase rate, Lyle, they're 28th in chase contact percentage. AKA, when you swing at a pitch outside of the strike zone, they're making contact in the bottom 3 of baseball. That makes sense right there. The other takeaway I had, while here's another notable number that I'll tie into the point I'm going to make after this. So they have the 6th lowest swing rate in baseball. They have the 27th rated swing rate. So they're 4th worst in baseball when it comes to swinging and missing at pitches. Bad, but not the worst. Again, the Mariners are outlier bad in strikeouts. You would expect them to be 30th, not 27th, 30th. But no, they're 27th in with rate. So here's my macro idea of why this is. I think they're being too passive, and when they are swinging, they're choosing poor pitches to swing at. So it's almost a bad combination of not being aggressive enough at the plate and therefore putting themselves in bad situations to chase pitches. I'll let you to respond to that because I do have one more thing to add on here.
My takeaway when we talked about how they're a top 5 team in chase rate says that they're watching way too many strikes go by because they're not swinging. They're not chasing pitches, but they're still striking out a ton, by far the most in the league. So if you're not doing it by chasing, for the most part, you're probably watching a lot of strikes. And the eye test backs that up. They are watching strike 3 go by a lot.
Now, Ryan Divish, when we had him on earlier this week, he thought that one of the big reasons for their high strikeout rate is when they're getting fastballs specifically, when they're ahead in the count, they're not doing damage with those pitches. They're instead fouling them and keeping the at-bat alive, therefore leading the pitcher to strike them out instead of them getting a hit or grounding out or flying out, etc. love Ryan. I was curious. I'm like, I want to find numbers to back this up when he's saying this. They're actually like right around middle of the pack in baseball doing that. Like ahead in the count, facing fastballs in the strike zone, middle of the pack in baseball, if not better than that, right? So that's not even the issue either. Getting pitches to hit and swinging at them, that really hasn't been the issue when they put themselves in opportune counts, in good counts. And they're trying to do that based on how many pitches they're seeing this year. But overall, the results are just not there. So in conclusion, it's on the Mariners to figure this out. I don't know if there's a solution with the current set of rostered players that they have to fix this, because this is pretty extreme. Usually a team will tell you what it is within a large enough sample size. 1 month, maybe not, but 2 months, if they continue to strike out 29% of the time over 2 months, then that's what this team is. And then we get to June and they're still sporting a 29% K rate. You realize, okay, so this roster is going to strike out a lot, whether we like it or not, whether we think we fixed the problem in the offseason or not. That does not matter anymore because this roster currently does strike out. And then maybe it comes with the addition of a Houston Astro who doesn't strike out all that much, right? To sort of try and mitigate that, where you put a guy in the middle of your lineup. Okay, he strikes out 21% of the time, or however high Kyle Tucker's strikeout rate is this year. So that, like, maybe it'd be that.
You beat me to the punchline. I was going to let you say all that, talk about what is the solution with this Mariners offense and their strikeouts. I was going to respond with a one-liner, but you beat me to it. Kyle Tucker strikes out 16.8% of the time.
Perfect. Except people, then people will say, well, he comes here, he's going to then strike out 26% of the time.
That'd be pretty good compared to where the rest of the group's at right now.
I would take 26% right now.
I mean, assuming you're pairing it with everything else Tucker brings to the plate offensively, yeah.
I'm just trying to think, like, where does the blame go with this? Like, seriously, is it on the org? Is it on Brant Brown, the new offensive coordinator? Is it a front office, philosophical, organizational thing? Is it individual level with the players and their private hitting coaches, who they work with just as much as they work with the guys in the org? Like, I'm puzzled. Like, it feels like it should be a collective effort to get this bad, really.
When we talked to Divish about this on Wednesday's pod, he was very, very adamant about the people online that keep saying it's the hitting coaches. It's not, because what Divish likes to make a point of is, where are all these people giving the hitting coaches all the credit when somebody has a really good at bat? When Cal hits the grand slam on Tuesday, or somebody comes up with a clutch hit, they don't get the credit. They only like to point fingers and blame when it's going south. And Jason Churchill, another friend of this pod, has been very adamant about making points about that this week too, is hitting coaches are not taking talent away from these players like they're the Monstars, stealing away talent from NBA guys to make themselves juggernauts. Like coaches are not sucking the talent away from players. That's not like, they can't go up and hit for them. That's not what's happening. I don't know if it's an organizational philosophy or if it's, more on players and their inability to, what's the right word? I mean, be patient, be more, have a better approach at the plate, just not chase the pitches, plain and simple. I think it's more on the players, if anything. The players are the one taking the at-bats. The coaches can give them all the information possible, but at the end of the day, it's those guys in the box, it's those guys seeing the pitches, it's those guys hitting or not hitting, in this case, striking out a lot. I think when it all comes down to it, yes, it is on each individual player to make a real effort, a concerted effort to cut this thing down.
Just to see so the players then, but then to see that all happen at once, that all the players happen to have at the same exact time their outlier worst strikeout year, all at the same time. It almost should not be possible. You know what's also frustrating? I was taking a look at some of those savant numbers I mentioned, chasing in the zone, or chasing out of the zone, fastballs ahead in the count, fouling them off, etc., stuff like that. I was curious. I was trying to find a similar team. You know a similar team I found? The Atlanta Braves. Yeah, they're pretty good. They hit a lot of homers. They're a pretty good offensive team. Similar profile, by the way, but they strike out 6% less of the time than the Mariners. Pretty similar chase numbers, in-zone swing numbers, whiff numbers, all of that. But the Mariners are the ones who are struggling offensively and are outlier worst in the league in striking out. Meanwhile, the Braves, last I checked, had the second best offense in the league behind the Dodgers. So it's possible to make the combination of what the Mariners are trying to do work, but the way it's being executed right now is suboptimal. And the more series the Mariners have like with this and facing pitching staffs like the Twins, the more frustration people are going to have. You're not confident right now if the Mariners go up against a starter who has plus stuff and he locates. Even against the Diamondbacks, Slade, how do you say his last name? The Miami kid, Cashone?
Slade Cecconi.
Cecconi, yeah. He unproven at the big league level for the most part, but really good stuff. Throws 96, has that slider, stepped on the bump and dominated against the Mariners because he has plus stuff and he was locating that night, right? So the feeling when the Mariners go up to the plate against a starter like they did today in Pablo Lopez, who has plus stuff and who's locating, you just don't really feel that confident because there's nothing this lineup does right now that would make the starter do anything but just go essentially like locate on the edges and then throw an off-speed pitch with 2 strikes and it's game over, right? 1 run.
Yeah. You know how you can honestly fix this? Time. And I don't just mean time for guys like Jorge Polanco to cut his strikeout rate down, which of all the players, he's the one I most expect for it to come down by season's end. If Jorge Polanco's not under 26%, I'll say, or 26.5%, I'll be very, very surprised. He just doesn't do this in his career. He just does not strike out this much. But along with that, I mean time for other guys to get back. So we highlighted all the guys who are striking out a lot, right? But when some other guys start to get back, you may see the strikeouts go down too. Here's what I mean. So let's highlight the guys who are under 25% in terms of their K rate. Ty France, he's the first baseman. Josh Rojas, he's usually in there at third. And then JP Crawford, when he's healthy, he'll be back in there at short. That's 3 guys. When Dom Canzone gets back, we have seen from him that despite a higher strikeout rate and a smaller sample through April, or start some of April, that in the minors and both last year in the majors, he is actually not a high strikeout guy. That's another guy that you can add back to the lineup and say, okay, Canzone should help cut down the strikeout. So now that's roughly 4. You've got Ty, you got Rojas, you got Crawford, you got Canzone. That's 4 guys who should strike out less. If you count on Polanco cutting the strikeouts down, at some point that should be 5. You got to give it time. Like I said, time is the key here. Garver, if you expect for it to cut down, another guy they signed with the intention that it will, that's 6. You have to rely on Polanco and Garver, not just hitting their stride, which is going to be the overarching theme of this season offensively, but cutting down the strikeouts. This is what you acquired them to do. That's 6 guys. Then if you throw in Cal and Julio, okay, those 2 might strike out a little bit, but it can be counterbalanced with other guys who aren't striking out as much if you have those 2 in the lineup. And even Julio shouldn't be striking out 28, 29% of the time either. He usually sits around the 25% mark, which is manageable. So if it's Cal, and then if it's somebody else that's in there, okay, Rayleigh strikes out a little bit. If you have 2 higher strikeout rate guys, but obviously Cal balances everything out with all the power he brings to the plate on offense, in time, there is a chance this can go down. So maybe that's the solution, is time. You outline all that. Those guys are in the lineup. It could come down.
Less people would be complaining about Julio's strikeout rate if he had like 9 homers right now, but he doesn't. Right. Which, again, the worst combination you can have. I know you said time is, something you got to look at. The Mariners don't have a choice. They can't replace their whole roster. Like, this is what they have. These players. It is going to be up to the players to strike out less and correct themselves. And again, if they don't, then, maybe they make the postseason. Maybe the pitching really does drag them there. But the team's not built to out-homer the best. It's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.